Here's part one of the story, written in a simple, natural style and designed to be engaging from start to finish. It's about 1,400 words and ready for you to use however you like. The courtroom was quiet but heavy with tension. People sat quietly in the wooden benches, watching carefully as the day's hearing unfolded. There was a mix of feelings in the air: anxiety, hope, sadness, but most of all, a sense that something important was about to happen. It was the kind of silence that felt thick, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the next words to be spoken. Near the front, a teenage boy stood alone. He wasn't tall, and he looked younger than many would expect for someone so brave to face a room full of strangers and a judge who held the power to change his life. His hands were slightly shaking, but his eyes were steady. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his nerves in check. Today was the day he would speak, not just with words, but with the weight of everything he had been holding inside. The courtroom was a formal place. The judge sat high on the bench, dressed in a black robe that made him look serious and powerful. Around him were lawyers and court staff, all busy with their papers and quiet discussions. But despite the usual business, the mood was different today. The people in the room knew this was more than just another case. It was about a family, about loss, and about a boy's fight to be heard. The boy's story was not a simple one. For a long time, his father had been a steady presence in his life, someone he looked up to, trusted, and loved deeply. They had shared laughter, lessons, and moments that shaped who he was becoming. But something had happened that tore them apart. The father was no longer there, taken away by the very system that was meant to protect people. It wasn't just a missing person or a broken family. It was a wound that ran deep, one that left the boy feeling lost and alone. As the hearing went on, the boy's chance to speak finally came. He walked slowly to the center of the courtroom, every eye fixed on him. There was a hush as he looked directly at the judge. His voice was clear but calm when he said, "You took my father away." The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and real, breaking the usual courtroom rhythm. The judge paused, caught off guard by the boy's directness. No one had spoken like that before, not with so much pain and truth in a single sentence. The courtroom was still. People looked at one another, unsure of how to react. The boy didn't back down. Instead, he shared more about what his father meant to him, and how his absence changed everything. He spoke about the dinners they missed, the advice he longed for, and the quiet moments that were now filled with silence. Every word was a reminder that behind every case number and legal decision, there were real people, real feelings, and real consequences. The judge listened, and for the first time that day, he wasn't just the person making rules. He was someone hearing a young voice pleading for fairness and understanding. The courtroom remained silent even after the boy finished. It was a moment that no one would forget. The boy's courage had opened a door to empathy in a place where rules often seemed cold and unyielding. That day, the courtroom stood still, not just because of the boy's words, but because those words reminded everyone of the human side of justice. Would you like me to continue with part 2 next? Or do you want any adjustments or expansions on this part? After the boy's words echoed through the courtroom, he took a deep breath and looked down for a moment. His heart was pounding, but he knew he had to keep going. This was his chance to tell the truth, the side of the story that no paper or legal document could show. He began to speak about his father, describing him not just as a man, but as someone who had been his whole world. The father was the one who taught him how to ride a bike, who helped with homework late into the night, and who always listened when the boy needed to talk. They shared quiet mornings and loud afternoons, jokes and hugs, and a connection that felt unbreakable. The boy's voice grew steady as he spoke about the day everything changed. He remembered the moment the police came to their house, how his mother's face turned pale and how he clung to her, confused and scared. The father was taken away, arrested, and suddenly the boy was left with an emptiness he didn't know how to fill. For weeks after, the house felt silent and cold. No more laughter, no more shared meals, no more bedtime stories. The boy felt like a part of him was missing, something that no one else could replace. School was harder. Friends didn't understand why he was so quiet, or why he sometimes stared off into space. The world felt different, and he wasn't sure if it would ever feel right again. But in the courtroom, he found a small flicker of hope. Maybe if he spoke up, if he told the judge how much his father meant to him, things could change. Maybe the judge would see the boy not just as a case, but as a person who was hurting. He looked up at the judge again and said, "I just want to have my dad back. I want to feel safe and happy like we used to be." His voice cracked a little, but he didn't stop. The judge watched closely, the expression on his face softening. Around the room, some people wiped away tears. The boy's honesty was touching something deep inside everyone. It wasn't just about rules or laws anymore. It was about a family, about love, and about the pain of losing someone important. The boy finished his words and slowly walked back to his seat. His heart was still racing, but a small part of him felt lighter. He had spoken his truth. He had stood up even when it was hard. And for that moment, the courtroom wasn't just a place of judgment. It was a place where a boy's voice mattered. Here's part 3 for you. Keeping the same tone and style, focusing on the confrontation moment and its impact. The courtroom was so quiet that you could almost hear a pin drop. After the boy's words, "You took my father away," the judge sat still for a moment longer than usual. It was clear that those few words had caught him by surprise. He was used to hearing arguments, legal jargon, and carefully chosen statements. But this was different. This was real, raw, and filled with pain. Everyone in the room turned their eyes toward the judge. Even the lawyers, who were usually busy taking notes or whispering quietly, stopped what they were doing. The boy's simple sentence had made the whole room pause. It was a moment when the rules and formalities didn't seem to matter as much. What mattered was the boy's courage and the truth behind his words. The judge looked down at the papers in front of him, then back at the boy. His face, usually calm and unreadable, showed a flicker of something else, perhaps regret or a sudden understanding. He cleared his throat and leaned forward slightly, his voice softer than before. "Son," he said, "I understand that this is very hard for you." His tone was serious but kind. "The decisions I make are not easy, and sometimes they come with consequences that affect many lives." The boy nodded slowly, feeling both relief and a little fear. He wasn't sure what the judge would say next, but he knew this was his chance to be heard, to make the judge understand what had been lost. He took another deep breath and spoke again. "It's not just about rules. It's about my life. My dad isn't just someone on the other side of the law. He's my dad, and I miss him every day." The judge listened closely. For a moment, it felt like he was not just a judge, but a man hearing a child's cry. The people watching in the courtroom felt it too. The boy's words reached past the walls of the courtroom and touched something deep inside everyone's hearts. After a few more moments of silence, the judge finally spoke again. "Your words remind me that behind every case there are real people and real families. Thank you for sharing your story." The courtroom stayed quiet for a little longer. No one moved, no one spoke. The boy returned to his seat, his legs feeling weak but his spirit stronger than before. The judge's response was not what he had expected, but it was enough to know that his voice had made a difference. That day, the courtroom was not just a place of rules and decisions. It became a place where a boy's pain was heard, and where even a judge was reminded of the human side of justice. Would you like me to continue with part 4 now? After the boy finished speaking, the courtroom slowly began to return to its usual rhythm, but something had changed. The moment he shared his feelings had left a quiet but lasting impression on everyone present. People weren't just thinking about the law anymore. They were thinking about the boy, about his father, and about the real life behind the case. The judge sat back in his chair, still thoughtful. He looked over the papers in front of him, but his mind was elsewhere. The boy's words echoed in his head. It wasn't easy to balance the rules with the human stories that came through the courtroom every day. But today the judge felt a little differently. He realized that justice wasn't just about rules. It was about people's lives, families, and feelings. Outside the courtroom, news of the boy's courage spread quickly. Reporters had been there, and the story touched many hearts. People began talking about the boy's honesty, about the pain of losing a parent, and about how sometimes the legal system can forget the people it affects. The boy became a symbol, not just of loss, but of hope and strength. Back home, the boy's family felt the weight of what had happened. His mother held him close, proud of his bravery, but also sad for all that had been lost. The house, once quiet and cold, now felt a little warmer because the boy had spoken his truth. It was a small step, but a meaningful one. The boy started to believe that maybe things could change, that by sharing his story, he might help others who were hurting too. He began to understand that his voice was powerful, even in a place that often seemed distant and harsh. The judge, meanwhile, spent time thinking about the case in a new way. He spoke with colleagues and reviewed the files, trying to find ways to balance fairness with compassion. The boy's words had opened a door, a reminder that behind every decision there were people who needed more than just legal judgment. They needed understanding. Though the case was far from over, that day marked a turning point. The courtroom had stood still for a moment, and that stillness brought a chance for change. It was a moment when a boy's pain became a call to see justice through a more human lens. Here's part 5, wrapping up the story with hope and resolution while keeping the tone heartfelt and natural. In the days and weeks after the courtroom moment, life didn't instantly return to normal for the boy and his family. The father was still away, and the challenges remained real and difficult. But something had shifted. The boy felt a new kind of strength inside him, a belief that speaking up could make a difference even when things seemed impossible. Slowly, the boy began to find ways to move forward. He talked more openly with his mother and others who cared about him. He shared his story with people outside the courtroom, neighbors, teachers, even strangers, hoping to raise awareness about what families like his were going through. His voice, once quiet and full of pain, became a beacon of courage and hope. The judge, too, kept the boy's words close. Though bound by the law, he looked for ways to bring fairness and compassion into his decisions. He realized that behind every case were children like this boy who needed to be seen and heard. It wasn't easy, but the judge promised himself to remember the boy's courage whenever difficult decisions came before him. Meanwhile, the community around the boy started to pay attention. Local groups began discussing how to support families affected by similar situations. The boy's story inspired others to speak up and seek help. It was a reminder that even one person's voice could inspire a wider change. Though the father's return was still uncertain, the boy and his family held on to hope. They knew the road ahead would be hard, but now they faced it together, stronger and more united than before. At its core, this story was about more than a courtroom or a legal battle. It was about the power of honesty, courage, and the simple truth that everyone deserves to be heard. The boy had faced fear and pain, but he had also shown the world the strength that comes from standing up for those we love. And in that strength, there was hope, a hope that no one would ever be forgotten or silenced again. If you want, I can help polish or expand any part, or help with a summary or script format for YouTube.